Hi everyone, my name is Julie 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐩𝐭𝐞𝐫𝐬, and today I'm going to tell you about 3 pitfalls to avoid when writing a literature review. So the 3 pitfalls to avoid are identifying a topic that is too broad or too narrow, forcing preconceived categories, or writing with an annotated bibliography approach. And I wanted to remind you that I created another video called How to Write a Literature Review in 5 Steps that you might want to watch before you watch this one. That one gives kind of the foundational understanding of what a lit review is and does. This one is just refining it a little bit, piggybacking on that to share 3 pitfalls to avoid so that you can write a successful lit review. Pitfall number 1 is identifying a topic that's too broad or too narrow. In this case, you really want to you have to walk this balance beam between being overly broad and overly narrow in your topic. A good rule of thumb is to identify a topic, but be flexible about it, kind of hang on to it loosely. The reason why this is important is because a literature review is just that. Literature is the research, and you're just doing a review of what the research reveals. So you must go where the research takes you. So you have to be a little bit flexible about it, but have this idea in mind that you want to be balanced between being broad and narrow. Now, these are typical elements that go into a student choosing a topic for a literature review. This is true of the students that I work with. They often concentrate on effects or causes. There's usually a disorder that's focused on, a therapy or a treatment, and then it's often narrowed to a certain population, but not always. So let me give you some examples, and I think you'll see how these elements work in some sample topics. The first one is the cognitive effects of alcohol use disorder. So focusing only on a certain type of effects with this particular disorder. Another one is maternal borderline personality disorder and its effects on children. So here the disorder is borderline personality disorder in mothers and how that affects children. And the third sample is the reasons or maybe the causes for late diagnosis in females of autism spectrum disorder. So here it's looking more for causes, or why is it that there is late diagnosis in females? So these are all 3 literature reviews from students I've worked with, and they had success with their lit reviews with these types of topics. But you can see how each one has some element of these topic elements in their selection. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is just show you that the research itself can inform your topic. So you might loosely have a topic in mind, a flexible topic, and then what you do is you start your research. And then you see from your research and the way you carry out those searches, what's becoming more prominent and what's becoming less prominent. For all of these searches, this is the assumption, is that you're using scholarly peer-reviewed journals within the last 10 years. The first example I have here, this is from EBSCOhost, a very common database that we use for library research. And I have 4 limiting phrases here: benefits, advantages, positive effects, animal-assisted therapy. I narrowed my population to adolescents, and then the disorder is autism or ASD or autism spectrum disorder. So you can see with all 4 of these, my search results were only 11. So that I changed it a little, and instead of using benefits as the term, I changed it to effects. And you can see that that made a small difference because I used all the same other terms except for effects is a little more neutral than benefits. And there I found 22. So in the first search, I only found 11. This one found 22. Then I opened it up a little further and I just took out the disorder. Maybe I would find other disorders that would come out here. Or maybe it would even, in the long run, I would find that this is applicable for autism spectrum disorder. But I just wasn't finding enough articles. So here I have 75, and that's a pretty good number. So you can just see with these examples that you just play around with different combinations, different terms that you use, and it'll give you more options as you're moving forward. So start with a topic that's fairly narrow, but not so narrow that you don't find enough studies. Definitely, if you only find 2 or 3 studies, your topic's too narrow, or you're not using a good approach in searching. So always reach out to your library support people and they will help you with that. The second pitfall is kind of related, but a little different. This is forcing preconceived categories. So what I mean by that is once you've identified your topic, you then have to think about subtopics or sub-themes that the research will uncover. You can take an educated guess. Like what would be those effects of animal-assisted therapy on adolescents with autism spectrum disorder? Well, maybe there would be, greater behavior regulation. Whatever the outcomes would be, you can kind of guess, but don't lock yourself into those categories or those outcomes because you may not be able to support them with what you actually can find in the research. So I used this example in my previous video about how to write a literature review in 5 steps. And I just wanted to point out an additional piece to this. This is my example of using the findings from multiple studies in order to try to figure out what those categories or subtopics within the broader literature review could be. And a way to discover what those themes could be is just to look at the findings and to state them very briefly. You can just get this information straight from the abstract. And I recorded the names of the researchers. And then what I did was I color coded. So yellow referred to life satisfaction, subjective well-being, happiness. And then green was strengthened relationships, and blue was decreased depressive symptoms. Okay, so, and these aren't all of the research that was uncovered, but these were some of the research studies. And then I added here at the bottom, this is in addition to my other video, a new study that was found that it could actually benefit have a health benefit, especially for people with cardiovascular disease. So let's say I get really excited about that and I want to cover it, but I can't find any other studies that corroborate that. Well, if that's the case, then I have to maybe let that go. I could maybe mention it in passing in the introduction, but I can't really focus an entire theme or trend if it's not coming out. So for example, this was the previous example I shared in that other video, that these were the 3 themes that came out of the research. The improvement of life satisfaction, strengthened relationships, decreased depressive symptoms, with plenty of researchers to back those up. Well, let's say I'm really excited about that health-related benefit, but I can only find 1 study. There may be dozens of studies, I don't know. This is just an example. But if that's the case, and I can't really corroborate it with other studies, then I may have to let that go. So don't force yourself into preconceived categories that you've already thought about, you've already really wanted to cover. You have to go where the research takes you. The third pitfall to avoid is writing with an annotated bibliography approach. An annotated bibliography is a type of writing, it's like a reference page, but you add little notes or summaries for each source that's listed in the reference page. So here's an example that of what one looks like. You have your reference, and then you have your summary. And so this would be like the top of the page. Here's the bottom of the page, another reference, another summary. So you can see there's not really any organization to this, except that the references are listed in alphabetical order by the author's last name, the first author's last name. So there's no rhyme or reason about the subtopics. We just know that in this example, it's the big topic of workplace stress. But under each study, it could be, you know, here's a subtopic A, subtopic B, then go back to subtopic A, then subtopic A, then C, then D. So it's just kind of scattered. So that's not the approach of a literature review. A literature review takes a very thoughtful, organized approach, very coherent, looking at all of the themes and presenting those themes into sections. Whereas an annotated bibliography summarizes the research study by study. There's no organization around themes or trends in the research. So if you can kind of see that's different, it'll help you to write a more successful literature review. So like I said, there are these 3 pitfalls to avoid. Be careful with your topic to make sure it's not too broad or too narrow. Don't force preconceived categories, and don't write with an annotated bibliography approach. If you avoid those pitfalls, you'll have a really successful literature review. Well, like I said, you can check out other videos I've created, including how to write literature reviews in 5 steps. And always feel free to reach out for support. Until next time, happy writing.